over to Michael and Sylvain.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Tiffany. I run a cybersecurity firm called White Ops, and we have been taking on ad fraud in this ecosystem because it's the best way to monetize botnet. The company has grown quickly and has its has quite a bit of reach, primarily because we're agnostic as to how media is evaluated, how quality is determined, whatever ad analytics platforms an advertiser may use. We're just a security company trying to take on the cutting edge of malware fraud. Now, in record time, we're going to try to tell you about the sophistication behind ad fraud, how the bad guys get paid, and what we're doing to use buy-side leverage to win this fight. First of all, it's a giant problem, probably a $7.2 billion dislocation. That's a current figure for 2016, and this is the top-line loss figure for digital advertisers globally. So not all of this money is actually going to the bad guys, but this is what the advertisers are losing on the, in between the advertisers losing this money and the actual cyber criminals operating the botnets. Many people are actually taking a cut of this money. We found that it affects every kind of digital media that we've ever studied, and fascinatingly, there's a curve where there's a large amount of fraud affecting low-priced media. This is just trash traffic, and then there's quite a bit of fraud on the high end as media gets higher priced because of the way that traffic sourcing works. Who are the perpetrators? They're cybercriminal botnet operators. A botnet is a group of machines typically owned by ordinary people. They have no idea that their machines have been compromised. They have a background process that's doing ad fraud. This is how the bad guys make money. And what the bad guys are doing, what a botnet operator does, is they sell visits to someone who wants visits. So the fundamental primitive of profit for the actual operators is to control a large number of machines and then send them as web visitors to people who are willing to pay to increase their audience. Now, there's a massive amount of bot traffic now on the internet, and under the MRC's leadership, we're drawing a distinction between what we call general invalid traffic and sophisticated invalid traffic. White Ops is particularly focused on sophisticated invalid traffic, what we think of as the cutting edge stuff, but there's a lot of just trash traffic out there. It should be low-hanging fruit, and it's disappointing how little of it is caught, how slowly it's caught. We think that we can really move the needle worldwide in just taking down the general invalid traffic. And so there's going to be increased pressure on really anyone who does digital measurement to take out the general IVT. This is stuff that you don't need a crack team of white hat hackers to find. There really should be no data center based web traffic making a lot of ad revenue these days. Nevertheless, there is about 2/3 of bad traffic comes from compromised residential machines. The other third is coming from places that we should be able to identify and purge from this ecosystem more easily. But the really sophisticated stuff is coming from ordinary people's computers, and this is why the problem is so thorny. Because right now, given the size of the room, almost certainly some of your computers are doing ad fraud while I talk. And if you are logged into Gmail, if you're sharing stuff on Facebook, if you're sending tweets, etc., and there's malware in the background of your computer, then the malware is all of those things too. The malware is coming from your device, which means it has access to your browser metadata. In fact, the malware browser process, the bot, could just be another browser window hanging off of your primary browser that just doesn't paint to the display and visits a bunch of extra websites all day long. That means that from the advertiser perspective, it's you. And from the third-party analytics perspective, it's you. This is how ad fraud defeats even giant platforms that have massive, high-quality first-party data, because the malware is coming from the same computer as the legitimate traffic that you're generating, and it has your cookies. So what that means is that this is a pervasive problem that more or less maps to population centers. And a massive number of computers get infected all of the time. They're not profitable all the time. So we're showing you a big stat there that 30% of US households are infected with some form of malware. These malware infections do get cleaned up. So that stat is large, not because it means that 1/3 of all machines are generating, say, ad fraud traffic today. But at some point while you own them, there is a chance that you're going to have a malware infection that's monetizing in some way. And you'll notice if it's something like ransomware, and you'll maybe never notice if it's something like ad fraud. The actual profits generated by this crime are coming from just the 3% of machines that have the freshest malware infection. And that's what makes this fight so hard, because we found that ad fraud does get caught eventually, but it gets caught after it's essentially paid out. So there's this period, we call it the profit window, between when a new computer is freshly infected and when it eventually gets identified as bogus by ad platforms or analytics companies, and their profit ends. So about half of the losses are coming from this moving window of about just 3% of machines, because I know that there's a lot of data analysts in this crowd. What this means is that when you look at the huge volume of bot traffic out there, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. It's just trash traffic. You can find it by doing statistical anomaly detection. You should be able to take that stuff down. The leading 3%, the really killer malware, is just about 3 times more performance than the average internet user, which means that it is totally in line with power user behavior. It doesn't look anomalous. It's generating just about 3 times more web visits than the average visitor. That just looks like a heavy browser. And 3% of machines globally doing that leads to about a $7 billion crime. The way that this traffic works its way into the ecosystem is that websites pay for visits and goose the numbers. So it could be bogus websites. It can also be name brand websites. The hardest hit victims at any given time are paying for 80% of the losses, and not all botnets are victimizing all advertisers every day. What this means is that when we randomly take a look at an advertiser, maybe they're just losing 5% of their budget to sophisticated ad fraud, but later in the year when they're hit particularly hard, the losses can go up, and that's why the aggregate losses are larger than the median. And the only way we're going to win this fight is if we actually shorten the profit window. You can't just catch the bots, you have to catch them before they profit. So what can we do as an industry to take on what is probably the world's most profitable cybercrime, and so is therefore attracting the best black hat hackers? It's not just about technology adoption, it's also about using your buy-side leverage to incentivize everyone in the supply chain to do the right thing. And to expound on that, I'm going to hand things over.
Thank you. Thank you. So we basically started to work with White Ops a year and a half ago, and a little less than a year ago, we launched what we call the Meta Quality Barometer, where we take 5 different dimensions to assess the quality of the inventory we buy from any vendor. Our idea is to use White Ops data as one of the bases, because there is something we cannot negotiate about, it's fraud. But we want to make sure that for each and every ad insertion we buy from any media vendor, we assess the quality using different dimensions. Our target is to make sure we sit next to publishers, because there is the one that need to be helped, to be trained, to understand what's going on, because what we found out very, very early on is that when we started to have the discussion with them, they didn't know about it. So some of the ad fraud is organized crime, just like Michael described. But the publishers that we are buying media from on a day-to-day basis are suffering from it, and they definitely need our help to fight it.